This webinar series was created by Correlation and the Rights Report Foundation to improve discussions on advocacy, harm reduction advocacy in Europe, and to engage people working in harm reduction in a dialogue about how to improve advocacy. We had 3 other webinars in the past. The first one was on harm reduction advocacy. Second was on video advocacy. The third one was meaningful involvement of civil society. And these webinars were recorded as well. So you can watch the video recordings on Correlation's website. So this time our topic is disinformation and moral panics and how they drive drug policies. I've been working in this field, the field of drug policies, for more than 20 years now. And for me, one of the key issues, or key experiences is that there are so many so-called zombie ideas in this field, in the field of drug policies. Peters and Nagel, in one of their articles, call ideas that that will not die no matter how often they are disproved zombie ideas. And I think drug policies are very often driven by those zombie ideas without any evidence base, but still very effectively changing how drug policies work. Where should I put this? So let you know some of these zombie ideas. What I mean by zombie ideas in drug policy. We can find many of these in the media, and also we can hear policymakers talking about them. For example, cannabis is the gateway to so-called hard drugs, that we can make society drug-free, can achieve a drug-free society, that illicit drugs are more dangerous than licit drugs. Legalization, decriminalization is a public health or security disaster. Just look at what happened in Oregon, the backlash against decriminalization around the world, and also that harm reduction condones drug use. Lately, there was a book written by Alex Stevens in the UK on drug policy constellations. I think if you are interested in this topic, he also covers this very eloquently in his book. So if you are not familiar with the term moral panic, this was introduced by a criminologist called Stanley Cohen in the 1970s in his book Folk Devils and Moral Panics. And actually, moral panics are the process where different kinds of social groups are presented as the exotic other, and as groups that are deviating from social norms and that are a threat to social values and social norms. And actually, the test example of moral panics is about drugs, the people who use drugs, and what we do in drug policy advocacy, at least this is how I feel. It's many times we try to counter these moral panics and their devastating consequences and effects in drug policy making. There are different categorizations of moral panic. There are elite engineered moral panics. There are grassroots moral panics, and also interest group moral panics, depending on how and who was initiating and championing the moral panic. But what is common is the role of the media, the role the media plays in inciting fear in the population about certain groups of society and pushing those groups to the margins of society. And according to another book written by Gouda and Ben Yehuda in 1994, moral panics can in principle become captured, routinized, or institutionalized into ongoing, long-lasting organizational structures. I think the war on drugs itself is in a way, we can explain it as a kind of institutionalized moral panic, because wherever moral panic happens about drugs, you will see that the result is either more criminalization or either more medicalization, but definitely more stigma and discrimination against people who use drugs. So moral panics either redefined drug use, which was more or less normal as deviant, or they reaffirm the deviant status of drug use and prevent the normalization of drug use. And there are many examples of moral panics that were driving tough on drugs approach or the war on drugs. Especially many cases are documented in the US, but also we could document many moral panics in around the world. For example, it is now very much documented fact that in America, racialized moral panics led to opium, cocaine, and marijuana prohibitions. For example, in the 1870s, there was the racialized myth that Chinese opium traffickers were enslaving white women and making them work in opium dens as sex slaves. And this led to a pogrom against Chinese, and in 1975, the first opium prohibition in San Francisco. Or in the 1910s, there was a cocaine panic and the myth that there is a so-called Negro cocaine trend, which that people got crazy on under the influence of cocaine, and they became resistant even to weapons. And this actually played a very significant role in the introduction of the first cocaine prohibition, or the 1930s very well-known anti-marijuana campaign led by Henry Anslinger, which was very much racialized again. This time, the target was mostly Mexican Americans who came to the US as immigrants, and this racialized moral panic led to the first ban on cannabis. And in the 1960s, we could see the moral panic against LSD in the end of the 1960s, as a backlash against the counterculture and the use culture. And LSD was blamed for murders and suicides. It was even claimed in the press that it destroys chromosomes and creates monsters out of people. And in the 1980s, we could see the crack panic, again, very racialized myths about crack cocaine users. There were headlines of the press with like messages like the most addictive drug known to man, or try it once and you are hooked. And there were a flood of news stories about babies that they were born from crack-using mothers who became permanently damaged. And William Bennett, drug czar, even claimed that there were more than almost like 400,000 crack babies were born in the end of the 1980s. Of course, these myths were disproved by science, but still very persistent. They were very persistent in the media for a long time. Or if you open online media these days, you will see the also very persistent myths of the zombie drugs. That whenever new drugs appear in the media, they are usually depicted as drugs that are ever more dangerous, and they create zombies out of drug users. Different kinds of new drugs are showed or by the media this way, alpha PVP or xylazine, or in Hungary, for example, synthetic cannabinoids is now shown by the media as zombie drugs. And this is very stigmatizing to the people who use these substances. The drug war also has its own folklore and of urban legends, which appear time to time in the press. For example, from the 60s, you can see the stories about LSD causing blindness, that LSD users are staring at the sun and they are blinded by the sunshine, or GHB as a date rape drug, which of course there are a few documented cases, but it's very much exaggerated by the press, and actually alcohol is a much more prevalent agent of this kind than illicit drugs. Or for example, from the 1980s or in the 1990s, you could see many stories about the so-called pinprick attacks, where this according to this myth, people living with HIV were attacking people and pricking them with a needle. Again, it was very stigmatizing for people living with HIV and people using drugs. So, the question arises: why are these myths and misconceptions and sometimes blatant lies are so persistent in the media, and why people believe them so much? You can find many answers to this question. One answer is given by, I think, an interesting book written by Chip Heath and Dan Heath. The book is called Made to Stick: Why Some Ideas Survive and Others Die. And in this book, they try to answer exactly this question: why are some ideas are so sticky in the public imagination? And according to the authors, we can learn how to spot these ideas and stories that has the potential to stick. What is more, although there are many damaging ideas and very harmful ideas spreading like wildfire, but we can also create our own ideas, which are also can become sticky if we formulate them if we formulate our messages in a way that is appropriate. So let's see the criteria they created for sticky ideas. First of all these very persisting and sticky ideas are simple. Simplicity is a very important principle. So it means that they usually one message contains one argument. People usually have difficulty comprehending complexity of the reality, so they prefer simple messages. These are not necessarily short, but simple and profound. Then second principle, unexpectedness. That also grabs the attention of people, something that violates people's expectation, something which is counterintuitive, which you would not expect. Then the third principle is concreteness. So sticky ideas are full of concrete images, human action, sensual informations. So, and also, concreteness can ensure that there is only one way people interpret and understand an idea. And it means the same thing to everybody. Then next principle is credibility. And credibility means different thing in the public communication and media than in science. So not scientific credentials, but usually it means lived experience. So lived experience is much more convincing to many people. And all these sticky stories and ideas carry their own credentials. Then the fifth principle is emotions. So people are wired to feel things for people and not for abstractions. So so all those ideas and messages that appeal to people's emotion are much more effective. And it's also important that they should appeal to the right emotion. For example, many people in this group know about the failure of some of the fear-driven drug prevention campaigns, such as the DARE campaign in the US. So when you appeal to the wrong emotion, your communication can backfire and cannot be effective. And then finally, the sixth principle of sticky ideas is stories. That usually these ideas are embedded in a story. That stories are engaging our emotions, and according to some research, people tend to remember 20 times more stories than just simple data. And stories provide stimulation and inspiration. So actually, uplifting stories can be also an antidote to the very harmful urban legends, and making people less cynical. So these 6 principles, that sticky ideas should be simple, unexpected, concrete, credentialed, emotional, and embedded in a story. This is actually the key to success in public communication. And I think we as harm reduction advocates, we can also use these principles when we are launching any media campaign, when we are engaged in public communication, and we are formulating our own messages. We have to keep in mind these principles if we really want to engage with people, if we really would like to inspire or mobilize people. So that these principles can be used for bad, and they can be used for good reasons. I would also like to speak a bit about debunking disinformation, which is also very rampant and very prevalent in our field. Disinformation about drugs, and sometimes you disprove one accusation against people who use drugs, or something like some false information, and then it comes back and back again. So what does the science, what do people who study communication say about debunking, and how to do this well? And first of all, there is something which was called by Alberto Bandolini the bullshit asymmetry principle. So he said that the amount of energy needed to refute bullshit is an order of magnitude larger than to produce it. So that's I think very true. So whenever you are fighting these disinformation campaigns or myths about drugs, unfortunately you have to invest much more time and energy than those who started to spread these lies and myths in the first place. And I think one of the reasons is that those people who are superficially educated, who have very little knowledge about something, usually have the most confidence about things. And this phenomenon is called the Dunning-Kruger effect. Maybe some of you heard about it. So that according to the Dunning-Kruger effect, people who have the least knowledge, very little knowledge, they have the most confidence. And when you start to learn about things, then you realize how much you don't know. So your confidence is going down. And then when you're becoming an expert, your confidence is rising again. But it may not reach the same level as those people on the top of the curve, those people who have very little knowledge but huge confidence. And I think if you work in harm reduction, you know these people very well. So you met with them, you argued with them, and sometimes, yeah, we need to deal with those people who are on the top of this curve. And there are some very useful guidelines available online, written by communication people, also by social psychologists who are studying myths, how the myths are created, how they are spread, and what we can do with them. For example, one was written by John Cook and Stephen Lewandowski, and this is called the Debunking Handbook. There are different editions available for free on the internet. And this guideline is about reframing our idea of debunking, because they say that debunking itself is a problematic concept. If you do it carelessly, then debunking can even reinforce the very myths that we seek to correct. So it's not just what people think that matters, but how they think is also matters. We have to understand how people accept these false ideas and disinformation. There are many so-called backfire effects when what we do is when our communication backfires, and the correction inadvertently increases the belief in the idea. One of the most important is the familiarity backfire effect. And this means that when we incorrectly we try to refute or debunk false concepts or a myth by repeating it first. For example, we start with repeating the myths, saying that it's not true, and then we are, listing our arguments against it. This kind of approach is not effective. What's effective is that we have to start with the message, with the factual information we want to reinforce in people's mind. So what do we mean by that? There are also research showing that this kind of debunking, which starts with repeating the misinformation, which starts with refuting the misinformation, it sometimes creates this backfire effect, because with time people will only remember the disinformation, and they will not remember the refutation and the arguments against it. For example, so this means that we need to use the fact-first approach. So first, try to focus on the fact which you would like to reinforce in people. Make it simple, concrete, and plausible. And it means to fit with the story. Then you can warn about the myths and explain why it's mistaken, and then you can reinforce the facts. An example about, for example, if you communicate about decriminalization, the accusation is that decriminalization will increase drug use, and the fact that the myth first approach is that you start refuting the misconception, the myth. You can find many articles online which using this approach, fact-checking articles also, and then op-eds and all these kinds of articles, which start with like, decriminalization will not reduce drug use, and that's not the best way to start your argumentation against this. And the better approach is the facts first approach. When you start with the core facts emphasized in the headline, for example, with a positive statement, decriminalization improves public health. And then you also list some facts or arguments that substantiate what you said. For example, if you don't punish people for using drugs, they stop hiding and will be more accessible for treatment, harm reduction programs, etc. And then you are embedding into these positive messages, you embed the refutation of the myth, that it's a myth that more people will use drugs if it's not a crime. And then you maybe bring an example, explain how this myth misleads people by, for example, making a reference to Portugal or any other countries that decriminalized drug use, and where the public health consequences were very positive of this decriminalization. So that's one important element, that this is a way how you can do more harm than good if you don't appropriately structure your arguments. And but according to research, if you are arguing in the facts first approach, then you will the debunking can be very effective. There is another about other backfire effect. So our arguments can backfire in other ways, and one of that is the overkill backfire effect. And in this case, you make too many counter arguments against a false claim. And if your arguments are too complex, you use too many arguments, it might produce the unintended effect, and it can be backfire. So it's always, and again, it goes back to the principle of simplicity, that you need to argue in a simple way, use fewer but very strong arguments. Then there is the worldview backfire effect, which means that people generally they tend to accept facts that reinforce their beliefs, their identity about the world. And I think it's not only true for stupid people, that can be also true for smart people. That's something I think we are evolutionary wired to, that that makes it sometimes very difficult to convince someone about our arguments or about effectiveness of harm reduction, who believe that that harm reduction is threatening some of their core beliefs. And there is this web of belief model that says that actually people have different levels of convictions. So there are there are political opinions, and then in the middle you can find the core beliefs, those values and principles people really believe in. And sometimes I think in our communication it's a mistake not to address those core beliefs that people really believe in. Like if people think that harm reduction will threaten their sense of security or whatever, then maybe we can address those core beliefs. Without addressing them, we can maybe superficially make arguments about cost effectiveness or whatever, but people will just emotionally resist our arguments. And also it's what is suggested by the authors is also to try to make your argument in a way that is less threatening to the identity of and values of people, and that's called the framing. So how to frame our messages is really important. Making a reference to common values, which should be protected, is I think it's a good way to do this. And finally, it's not only enough to debunk false claims or accusations. We should also provide an alternative explanation. Social science research also shows, that if you are debunking the myth, but it leaves behind a kind of empty space in people's mind, the myth will come back, or another myth will replace it. But we need to really create our own narrative, explanatory narrative, which fills the gap in people's mind. So it's not enough just to prove that that something is not true or something is not right, but we should provide a positive alternative, a positive narrative which people can find their values in. There were also, I found a meta-analysis which was made not so long time ago, which came with this very similar conclusions. They reviewed many articles, many studies on debunking strategies, and they came up with very similar conclusions. So we need to reduce the generation of arguments in line with the misinformation. We need to create conditions that facilitate scrutiny and counter-arguing of misinformation, and correct misinformation with the detailed information, but keep expectations low about it. There is another report which I would like to recommend you, especially if you live in countries where there is the so-called phenomenon of shrinking space for civil society. That is in many countries in Europe now. Civil society organizations experience a crackdown from governments and some attacks from the pro-government media, and civil society is often scapegoated and attacked as, for example, serving foreign interests. And the Berlin-based organization Liberties published a report about just for those organizations who are fighting this kind of disinformation campaigns in the media, a guide for progressive civil society facing smear campaigns. It also has some useful guides, useful recommendations about how not to communicate and how to communicate. What they recommend is, instead of myth busting, we should use the so-called truth sandwich model, which is very similar to what I was speaking before. So don't repeat unhelpful frames. So when you are accused of something, don't put your counter arguments in the same frame. Create a completely new frame for your arguments. So you have to emphasize your mission, your core values. You have to put your refutation into a positive framework, and then the refutation of the concrete myths can be embedded into this positive framework somehow, but don't use the same framing what are used by those who are against you. And also you can go into an offensive, so you can prove that that those who are scapegoating you, those with power, they are ingenuine, and they can be discredited. Their motivations can be discredited. And yeah, and also we need to return to what we stand for, expressing it as the solution and the way forward. So just an example, if an organization are accused of like LGBTQ groups are accused of spreading an ideology that harms our children, we must stop this propaganda, then one way to respond to that is that the myth-busting response. So we are not spreading harmful propaganda. Recognizing LGBTQI persons is not an ideology. So you start with refuting the accusations. But the true sandwich model, according to the true sandwich model, is no matter who, one way to answer it, to respond it. No matter who we vote for, most of us agree that our leaders should govern for all of us, but some politicians are so desperate to hold on to power that they try to divide us based on who we love. They hope we'll be too busy blaming each other to realize the problems they've caused while they've been in power. So that you can provide your own alternative frame, how you are explaining this whole fight. And in the end of my presentation, I wanted also to share with you a few tips about public communication. So in the media, also if you have to speak in public, some good methods we can use in public communication. For example, using metaphors, like comparing harm reduction to safety bells. Using some metaphors that people can very much understand, even if they have absolutely no experience with drugs. Using stories and anecdotes, as I mentioned, stories can always be more memorable. People remember stories better. It appeals to their emotions. So you can use some of the stories you have maybe with your clients. Of course, you have to protect their privacy and anonymity, but you can use some stories that really reveal something about the system, that reveal maybe the abusiveness and discrimination embedded in the war on drugs, or the success of harm reduction responses. Expression of moral conviction. So we must protect the lives of the most marginalized people in our society. So we need to often refer back to those core values we want to protect, and that these values we share with the general population. So even if we are fighting for a marginalized group, it doesn't mean that we don't serve the whole society as a whole, and the principles and values that we build as our societies. Contrasting harm reduction with criminalization can be also a good idea, like, to explain how criminalization disconnects people from society or harm reduction reconnects them. This is one example, but you can find many similar examples how to contrast the punitive approach with the harm reduction approach, or abstinence only way and abstinence only method and harm reduction methods. Reflection on of the group sentiment, so we can empathize with our audience. Like clearly stating that we know what people, how they feel and what they think. And we can use rhetorical questions in our public communications, which we will not really answer because everybody knows the answer to these questions. So these are also like rhetorical tools. Actually, these kind of tools are described in WHO's guidelines against the vaccine deniers. So we can also use those kind of guidelines, communication guidelines, when we are refuting disinformation about drugs and harm reduction. And if you speak to the media, my organization, Right Supporter Foundation, has a media training, which is 1.5 day long. And in that training, we train people how to give interviews to television, to newspapers, how to write press releases, how to organize a press conference. We also do test interviews with people, television interviews. So we play like a test TV crew, and then we analyze the interviews together. I think that can be a very good exercise. So if you are interested in a media training with us, you can reach me out on my email. And it's in your communication, you should keep in mind a few tips. We have much longer training about this, but just a few of them here. I think what's very important in your media communication first is to prepare some key messages. So be ready when you are approached by the media. Be ready with maybe 4 or 5 good messages, which are some kind of communication panels you can use in all kinds of media situations or all kinds of interview situations. I think that's very much the basis of media communication. And then if you have these strong messages, if you design it together with your staff, because it's usually it's a collective exercise to design good messages, then you can not be surprised by any question in the media, because you can just return to your own message. And that's the really important in media communication. You know, it's that you are not there to entertain the reporter. You are there to deliver your message, and you can just repeat, go back to your message when you try, when the reporter is trying to distract you from it. Don't repeat. Again, in the media, it's also important, don't repeat any accusations, because especially in the television, but even in other media outlets, they can just, edit what you said, and they can repeating an accusation is harmful in general in media communication. Also, if you try to be balanced and you make arguments for your opponents, you don't do that. You may do that in science, but you don't do that in media communication. Of course, a very common mistake in our circles, using too much professional jargons, acronyms. We do a lot of videos in this field. We interview a lot of people, and sometimes, we have to remind people not to use like all these acronyms of ARV and PLW, the A, and all these kind of acronyms, because people, the audience of media, they just don't know them. Keep your messages and communication simple and concise, because the longer you speak, the more they can misinterpret what you said. You can use humor, but it can be a double-edged sword. If your topic is very serious, you can be blamed for making fun of people who are suffering, especially in the health field. That can be damaging if you use humor in not in the appropriate place. Try to be inclusive. So try to make the people who are listening to you or watching you feel that, yeah, our interests are the same. There is a common collective V, and what you want to do is to work for this V, and also tell the truth. I mean, if you are caught by the media saying anything you are not sure of, you answer a question you are not really certain the answer of, you can lose your credibility forever. So credibility is your very important asset and value in media communication. So this was a presentation I wanted to give you about disinformations and how to respond to disinformations. I hope you found that useful, and I hope we can have some discussion about this presentation. So now I would like to give you the floor. If any of you had any thoughts, questions, or comments about what I was saying, I hope it was creating some kind of, or it provoked some thoughts in you as well. Because as I see the names here on the list, I know that most of you are engaged in some kind of communication, and you met many prejudices and misinformation in your own work. So please raise your hands if you have any thoughts or ideas to share, or experiences. Don't be shy. Okay, I don't see any hands up. Any stories you want to share? Magda, yeah. Before Magda, you start, answer to Jamie Bridge. This is recorded, and this will be on the correlation website, and I can share with you the slides as well. No problem. So Magda from Poland. Hello,
Yeah.
Magda.
Hi. Okay, so I would like to share with you our story, and it's actually it happened almost 10 years ago. So at that time in 2015, after 6 years in one place, we lost our premises where we had drop-in center due to protests of the residents. We were looking for other premises for a couple of months, and all district mayors refused to help. So at one point we decided to go to media, saying that we do need a place, otherwise we won't be able to conduct projects or apply for the funding. The main Warsaw local newspaper on the city level, it wrote about our struggle, and the section, this Warsaw section, is just one of different sections from the main newspaper, main Polish, the biggest one. And it was a front page article. I was invited to the city hall to talk about it. They weren't happy, but the effect was that they declared they want to help the mayor of Warsaw. So for next couple of months, numerous articles were published. And basically the message was that there's this organization doing projects which are funded by the Ministry of Health and the city, and is looking for a place to conduct the activities. So it was very neutral language, and underlying the need for the project. At some point, one mayor of one district agreed to help. So we were still, having talks with this mayor and with the city authorities. You have to know that Warsaw is run by the administration of Warsaw looks like there's this mayor, the mayor of the city, but each district has its own mayors. So in a way, there are political fights between certain district authorities, and it's in this case it's very important. So the mayor that agreed to help, we were in a process of getting a new premises, which was really a very good one, located quite away from the resident buildings. That was crucial. But the information about this process leaked to the district local media, a different newspaper, very, just writing about this particular district, and it exploded. So people, the residents, started to disseminate leaflets using this dehumanizing language about, wave of drug users attacking the district and the need to defend themselves. There were football hooligans involved in this, also, threatening us and threatening people who use drugs at the same time. So the mayor decided to organize a meeting with the residents. We were present there, and it was really difficult. Well, I wouldn't call it discussion, but it was a very difficult meeting for us, because we were basically, attacked. Also, the language was a bit like from 90s, irrational, and it seemed that people were venting their anger, and not just their anger related to this issue, but more generally. So they were really furious, saying stuff like, you can get infected by just passing someone who is HIV positive, and that sort of stuff. It was fueling the moral panic was fueled also by the district politicians who were opponents to the main city authorities. And it was really difficult. I mean, it wasn't really possible to break through this mobilized protest. So the mayor of the district, really, at the beginning, he was using these arguments and trying to counter allegations. But at some point, his language also changed from defending the idea, then to, gradually he just stopped to defending it. He just was replying to people, but didn't really have this message that it's that we needed. And he eventually backed down this decision, and so we then again were left without the premises, and tried to look for something else instead. So this story is, for me, it has different. There are different issues that are important. First of all, is this, the message from the mayor of the district, but the message of the city authorities also, the message that he did not defend till the end. So at some point he just, said, I mean, it's too much. I can't really do it. I mean, there's nothing else I can do. And also the way that it got out of control, and the media, the district media, were absolutely leading this panicked hysteria. So and when you don't have an influence and impact on the district media, there's really not a lot you can do, because once this dehumanizing language is there and people are furious, it's difficult just to stop it, to cool the emotions down. Yeah, so this is our experience.
Thank you, Magda. Was there any like a lesson learned from this for you, like which you would not do the same way, or you would do in another way in your communication?
I would say that it was, so the idea to reach media for support, it was effective because, you know, at some point we did have this perspective of getting the premises. But then when you have a different news outlets and newspapers, you can't really, you don't really know how it's going to be presented. So it's that, I would say that approaching media and confronting authorities made sense, but we probably should have done it differently, meaning that we should anticipate that something, you know, bad could happen, but we didn't. So it was just like a, you know, explosion, and then the reaction, then you don't know really how to react. That would be probably the lesson we got from this story.
Yeah, I agree with you that media can be very beneficial, but also very damaging if it's especially if it's a hostile media environment in that country or that city. The same happened with us in Budapest. So yeah, in this kind of hostile media environment, it's very difficult for an NGO with very small resources and capacities to compete with all those, you know, media outlets and politicians with their bigger resources. And I don't think that you can blame yourself for this incident, because there are sometimes, you know, you cannot win this battle, but yeah, you maybe you will win it in another time in the future. So yeah, thanks for sharing this story.
Thanks.
Anybody else would like to share anything? As I see that we have a question in the chat from Philene about, Philene, do you want to say it or should I read it? So that you say the journalists are looking for people who tell stories that create pity, and they deliver the message that addiction is an individual problem. We are working on educating the journalists about the possibilities to narrative the issue. Do you have more ideas? What else we can do? Yeah, I think this is exactly what I was speaking about about framing. You know, that the media has its own framing. They want to use this framing, and we all know this, that they want to make out people who use drugs something like a pitiful creatures, you know, that and they want to medicalize all this problem. But by providing some counter narratives and framing our messages in our own framework, I think we can somehow counter these efforts. These days, the hybrid media space, social media can also play a role in influencing media, mainstream media, and the other way. You can come up with your own stories, either videos. We had the second webinar on video advocacy. You can do your own video stories with relatively minimal resources, and then that can also create news in the mainstream media. So that's a kind of, there are competing narratives and competing frameworks, and we need to promote our own narratives and frameworks. Anna from Ireland.
Thanks, Peter, and thanks, William, for the presentation. There's lots of really useful links in there for materials, so thanks for that. It'll be really helpful. Yeah, no, just maybe quickly, just a little bit, just our experience in Ireland sort of recently, and I suppose overall, even though we don't always feel like it, maybe our media isn't as hostile at it as it is maybe in some other countries. But I suppose one of our experience, as we know, last year we had a citizens' assembly on drugs here, which is basically a structure. It's outside of formal government, where 99 random citizens, as a representative of the population, are selected, and they go through a process of hearing a whole range of witnesses and evidence around the issue. This issue was around future drugs policy. And a very, very strong recommendation from that Citizens' Assembly is that we should end the criminalisation of people who use drugs. Very strong, and the chair of the committee very unequivocal about it, like that is absolutely what is being recommended. No sort of ifs or buts about it. And very clearly, because the members of the Citizens' Assembly told us that what really, really, really influenced them in that direction was what you were saying, Peter. It was speaking directly to people who use drugs. It was hearing their stories. It's that direct engagement that works so well, because it wasn't just that they were getting sort of presentations and inputs from people. As part of the process, they were sitting down and having conversations afterwards over the coffee. So this idea that somehow you've got a separate, different kind of group of people was, for anybody thought that their whole idea was change, and they could see that people are people, the people who are here talking about the drug use are the same as us. And that had they say that it's that, as they described it, that lived experience piece was, obviously they heard lots of other evidence, but that was the crucial piece. And that's something we've been working with for a while, and seeing does have a level of kind of effectiveness with those stories when somebody is talking not as I am a person who has a problem with drugs. They're talking as I'm a person, and you have a whole profile and you have a life same as everybody else's, and as part of that you're using drugs or you have used drugs. And so it's really absolutely, like that Citizens' Assembly experience would say, look, that really is a key, even though you can't do it on a big scale, and we were lucky to have that particular forum, but very clearly that shows with whatever the general public. But I suppose one of the issues, and we're hoping that will be implemented soon, the ending criminalisation. But one of the challenges then that keeps coming back all of the time, no matter how far we feel we're getting with the ending of criminalisation, we do feel we're getting there, is that the dominant media narrative is always about the drugs trade. Certainly in Ireland, you can be making loads and loads of progress around people who use drugs and people feeling, no, we shouldn't. But then something significant happens around the drugs trade, and the whole narrative is taken over again by this association of the drugs issue with bad people, with violence, with bad things. And again, in the general media and general public, people tangle all of them together. And when they hear the word decriminalisation, then they're thinking, oh, so you want to make all these criminals, pardon all these criminals. So and particularly in Ireland at the moment, because there's the Irish police are very involved in high level international stuff, and they're that's always getting publicity. And we do have a very violent drug situation in local communities around the drugs trade. We have a lot of violence, a lot of intimidation. So this is kind of the quandary, I suppose, and it's more just something we have to struggle with around how we continue to advocate and campaign in the face of that kind of picture of this mayhem and these dangerous criminals who could run our country and run the world and all this kind of stuff. Because the obvious response we should have to that is, well, the illegality of the drugs trade is like having a trade that's illegal is just as damaging as having personal use illegal. But at the moment, we don't want to get drawn into that, because we're focusing on, let's just get the ending of criminalisation over the line. That's what our focus has been on. We're close to a win on that. So let's just get that. And we don't want this stage to be drawn up into what are more complex arguments about the regulation of the drugs trade. But at the same time, knowing that, somewhere that has to be done. So it's a challenge of trying to maintain the focus on, and we're just talking about people, and people who you've heard their stories, and ordinary people like yourselves and your family members, and we don't want to criminalize them and not get drawn into the big narrative, because we all know in the end of the day, the only way you're going to end all that violence and criminal engagement, obviously if you have a criminal market, it's run by criminals, big surprise. But we feel if we get drawn off into that, then we run the risk of losing maybe the getting that ending criminalization of people over the line. So it's just a challenge. There's no easy answer to it, but it's a challenge all the time, because I think certainly in Ireland, the dominant narrative that always wins out is the one around the drugs trade. It just sells more newspapers. It's more, for a lot of people, it's more interesting, or they can make more TV series about it or films or whatever. So, but that's just an ongoing challenge, and particularly because in a logical world, we should get drawn into the discussion around, well, having an illegal trade, what do you expect? But we're trying to kind of have that a bit further down the line in the future. So, yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Very important points, and I can feel you. I feel your frustration when we come up with some important report or whatever, and then it doesn't make the headlines really. And then you see that there was the police made some seizures of drugs or arrested someone, and that makes the headlines, and that's so interesting. So I can be also sometimes very frustrated about this. But I think what was really important, what you said, was that using the stories of people who use drugs. I mean, if you think back about what I was saying about the principles of sticky ideas, the 6 principles, and there are many of these principles we can use on our favor, like, unexpectedness, as you explained. People don't expect people who use drugs come up and saying that, yeah, I'm feeling okay. Of course, I need some support, but actually, I'm just a regular citizen who sometimes use illicit drugs. Or the credibility, that the lived experience. You can debate opinions, but you cannot debate lived experience. So I think we can use those on our favor.
Yeah. Just one quick point, Peter,
yeah.
just to say to the Citizens Assembly, anyone who spoke, they would still, and maybe off the record they still didn't introduce themselves as people who are currently using. There's this kind of silence, because everybody knows now, don't actually say that until criminalization is gone. I mean, there's, people's stories will kind of tell sometimes, but it's still, people still don't feel safe to actually describe themselves, talk about current use. So it's always sort of, okay, we leave it as this is a person. We've used the phrase uses drugs, but it's generally taken to mean, oh, well, they used to. So, and often just the approach people take is don't ask about that, but officially the view is, oh, these are all people who no longer use drugs. And until we get the ending the criminalization of possession over the line, then that kind of remains the case, even though people know it's not the case really.
Yeah, and I think that fear is one of our main enemy, like that people are afraid to come out as people use drugs, and this threat is even bigger, of course, in the eastern part of Europe, where we have much more repressive drug laws. And in Hungary, for example, people use drugs don't even come to a conference to speak there, not even as just people having past experience, because they are so much stigmatized. So yeah, we are in the different levels, I think, of this struggle. So if you have if there are no more comments or stories to share, I just would like to wrap up. And as I see, I missed one of the slides I still wanted to show you in the end. Just a moment. Yeah, this one. So that I think if we as people working in harm reduction, what we need in communication is very similar. We should use the very same principles. We should apply those same principles in communication, what we use in our work as harm reducers. Compassion, that we need some empathy. We need to empathize with our audience, even if we don't agree with them. I think that's very necessary if you want to communicate effectively. And some pragmatism. So you have to carefully choose the message you use for and what audience you use for that message. And with this closing remarks, I would like to thank you for coming and participating. As I told you, the video recording will be available on Correlations website. And yeah, have a great week. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, Peter. Thanks all.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.